Okay, well today we're going to go over a technical topic on Bhava cusps. This is something that's come up often in classes with clients, ever since completing the free Introductory to Vedic Astrology course on my YouTube channel. It's come up again, because I did mention it briefly. But anyway, in between now and then, I was having a discussion with Lada and Sheva, and we were trying to figure out a way to explain this so that people could get their mind around it, because it's somewhat of a complex topic. So I told her that after I got done working on the second book, The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2, I'd see if I could put a video together. So this is it. So thank you, Lada, for the opportunity to do this, and hopefully it'll help all of us understand the Bhava cusps a little bit better. So I do have a number of images that we're going to use to help illustrate what the cusps are, and that's essential, because just to talk about it, you're not going to get a clear grasp of what they mean, and you'll still be kind of nebulous on what's going on there. So you'll understand a little bit, but not quite enough. But when we can actually see what's going on with the Bhava cusps graphically in relation from us to the Zodiac and what exactly they're doing, that'll help you understand what's going on with the cusps. So first of all, what we need to understand about the cusps is that the cusps represent the concrete aspects of our life, whereas the houses represent our relationship to those aspects of our life. And oftentimes we can do a reading without even using the cusps, because how things develop within our life are really, truly dependent on our capacity to connect with, or our relationship to that thing. Even if the thing is bad, if we have a good relationship to it, oftentimes it can seem like it's working well. And the cusps, these are the areas, the points that you want to use to figure out what's going on in other areas of your life or with other people in your life. So for example, when I was doing Vedic astrology many years ago, I would look at, say, the third house. I would take the third house of a person's chart, I would turn that into the ascendant, and I would read the person's chart from the third house to figure out what was going on with maybe their younger siblings. Or if I want to know about the mother, I would look at the fourth house, and I would turn that into the ascendant, and I would read the chart from there by dashas and so on to get a sense of what's going on with the mother. And often that would work, but at other times it wouldn't work. And I began to notice a pattern that it didn't necessarily work with people or with clients that I had that lived further north on the globe. Meaning I have a lot of clients in Norway and Sweden. For some reason, I'm not sure why, but I do. And when I would do their chart and I would try to apply this principle, I would often be wrong. And so over the years, I was curious about why this was the case, until eventually I discovered, using the Bhava cusps, using the Campana system, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And by doing that, a lot of these issues that weren't making sense before started to fall into place. So what does this mean? Okay, I am going to illustrate this, but let's imagine for a moment that the indicator for mother has Rahu and, we'll say, Mars. Rahu and Mars in the house that deals with the relationship to the mother. So this can give a lot of frustration and confusion, difficulty with the mother being logical, again if it's in bad dignity. And so the relationship from the person who has that chart to the mother will show difficulty within that relationship to the mother. That's if Rahu and Ketu are in the fourth. But sometimes, depending on how the cusps are situated when we're born, the fourth Bhava cusp might actually occur in the third house or in the fifth house. And maybe in those houses we have an exalted Jupiter, or we have a really wonderful Venus. And so what that will tell us is that the mother, the concrete person of the mother, will have more of these positive Jupiter and Venusian qualities. So as the mother, as herself, she might be a perfectly wonderful, lovely person. But since there's that Rahu and Mars in the fourth house, this person's relationship to the mother, there is difficulty, there is friction, there is confusion, There's drama with the mother. And so this is really wonderful to get a sense of, because oftentimes we think that just because we have a difficult relationship with someone, it means that there's something wrong with that person. And this is one of the beautiful things about astrology, is we start to see that that's not true, or it can be true, but it's not always true. And it may just be that our tastes are different, or the way that we're meant to interact with our family or friends or whatever it might be, bosses, authority figures, is just based on our karma from past lives. And so remember, our relationship to a thing is based on the houses. Okay, so standard Vedic astrological principles that we're used to. That individual as a person, we need to look at the cusp that represents that person. So 5th cusp will be children, 4th cusp mother, 10th cusp will be career, 7th cusp can be partners. And these don't always fall in the same houses. Now they will if you were born close to the equator. The closer you are to the equator, these cusps line up along with the houses. And it makes it easier. And so when astrology was practiced, primarily in India or places closer to the equator, we didn't have to worry about cusp systems or house systems too much, because it all lined up because we were close to the equator. But since the practice of Vedic astrology has grown beyond India and beyond that area in which it first formed, we have to figure out how it can work and adapt to these higher regions and these lower latitudes, or maybe not latitudes, closer to the North Pole and closer to the South Pole, which further indicates that point, that we really need to treat astrology as a science that's growing, that we're discovering new things, just like any science, rather than just being bound by tradition. Tradition's great, wonderful foundation, but if we were still living in such a way that we thought the Earth was flat, or if we were still thinking that if you sailed out into the ocean, you'd fall off. Well, that was an old body of knowledge, and we eventually discovered new things and grew from it. So using the house cusp systems, not just the equal house cusp systems, or not just the Shripati system, but, for example, the Campanus, which seems to work very well, we're able to apply this science to more people more accurately. Okay, so enough of that introduction. We'll talk more about it when we get into the actual visuals, the graphics that I've brought up for us today. And so take your time with this. This is something that took me a long time to think about and consider. I think it takes a lot of people that way, unless you just have a natural way of understanding things spatially. And review this video so that you can understand what's going on. And remember, this cusp system and this whole idea, this also brings up the point that as astrologers, we're used to just looking at a piece of paper, and we really need to get a sense of astronomy, a sense of what's actually, go out inside and look in the sky, and you'll see that the zodiac doesn't just go right overhead. It actually, if it goes over the horizon slightly, depending on where you live, and I do have an example for that. And you also see that the way the planets rise and fall, to me, it was actually contrary to what I imagined based on looking at a chart. Because for years, I just looked at a chart, and I didn't even go outside and look at the stars. So we need to get a sense of this astronomy, the movement of the sun, the motion of the sun, the 30-degree increments of the rashis. And even when it comes down to the zodiac, one thing that you'll find if you actually look at a map of the zodiac, the constellations, that's what I mean, the actual constellations in the sky, you'll see that the constellations as stars, combinations of stars, are not just 30 degrees. Some of them are 40 degrees, some of them are 20 degrees. So this whole idea of visual phenomenon for zodiac, it's a good argument in some cases, but it's not a good argument in other cases. So the more we think about these things, we start to see the discrepancies, and we start to understand just how all this fits together in a logical fashion. So enough of that. Let's go ahead and move on to the examples and the descriptions of just how we can understand the Bhava cusps and the Campanus system. To understand these Bhava cusps, we have to understand what exactly we're looking at when we're looking at a chart, and how these cusps lay out over the chart. So this is the Earth. We've got a globe here. And we're all born at different places on this globe. Now, the closer we are born to the equator, the more evenly spaced our house cusps will be. the further north we go, or the further south we go on this Earth, the more these cusps bunch up together. And this is a little more easily illustrated if we use some star maps, what we'll do here in a minute. But what we also need to understand is local space. And it's basically our view of the sky, the heavens, so the heavens and the earth together, and how we view it based on where we're born, or where we are. So this diagram here helps us to understand local space. Now this is not the globe. This is not what we were just looking at. This is the space that would be around you based on where you're born. So where my mouse is, that little dot right in the center of this sphere, that would be you at birth. And then all of this would be around you in a globe-like fashion. So a quick illustration we have to show that is here. So we have the globe. Here is you at birth, born here on the edge of Africa. And we see that the diagram we just had, it's not right around the globe, so it's not the globe, but it's a spherical space, local space around you based on where you were born, with you right in the center. Okay, so let's go back to this. Let's describe this. So in order to figure out houses and house cusps, we need to understand a few things. First of all, this line here is the horizon. It's where the earth meets the sky. So this will be your horizon at birth within your local space. This point up here is directly overhead. It's not north, not the direction north, but it would be if you just looked straight up into the sky. That's what you would see, this point here. Now this direction can be north, but that's not directly overhead. Remember, whenever you look up, you're not looking north, you're looking up. North is a direction. Now over here we have the east point, which is where it's the eastern horizon, the eastern part of the horizon. Okay, and you see it crosses through the horizon. Now these other lines that we have, this is the ecliptic. And what is the ecliptic? That is the path of the stars through the zodiac. And as you can see, it's not straight like you would imagine. Like you can see the horizon here, and that would be like a straight plane. But the ecliptic doesn't go straight up or straight down. I mean, the closer you are to the equator when you're born, yes, it might be further up. But most people aren't born that close to the equator. This line here actually represents the equator. And so what we can understand is that the ecliptic doesn't follow the equator. It actually crosses the equator. And this makes a lot more sense if you actually go out in the sky at night, find the zodiac, and see that it's not directly overhead, again, unless you're living right on the equator. It'll be just an arc, maybe not as high as you would expect it to be, especially if you're living further north. And we have diagrams for this too, so just bear with me. So these are things you have to start thinking about in order to understand the cusps and the house systems. And it might take you a little while to get it all in your head. It took me a while. And that's why I created some of these drawings, because this is how I understood it a little bit better. Okay, so anyway, we have this prime vertical, which is what we use to create the house systems and the cusp systems, and how it intersects with the horizon. So in order to figure out how the house cusps line up, we need at least three things here. We need the prime vertical, which cuts through the east point and intersects the zenith directly over your head. So if you were to look east, and then you were to look directly overhead, and then you were to look directly west, that arc right above you would be the prime vertical in this regard. Now, here we have the north point. So the North Pole will be here. So wherever we find the North Pole intersecting the horizon and the zenith directly overhead, that's going to give us a north point on the horizon. And this is where the house cusps lines are drawn from. So from the east point, the point in the east, to the north point, this is going to create the first Bhava cusp. And as you can see, it might be slightly skewed, because we have to take it from the east point and cut it through the ecliptic. So where that horizon line cuts through the ecliptic between the east point and the north point, that's going to be your first Bhava cusp. And since that ecliptic doesn't just go straight up and down, you can see how these Bhava cusps can be further spaced out, and they can also bunch together, depending on where you were born. So what does that mean? Well, let's take some examples here. This is the star map of Bangalore, I believe 1955. And what is this map? How do we read it? Well, the point right in the middle, not this line, ignore this line, but right in the middle, this is going to be the zenith directly overhead. So if you're in Bangalore on this date and time and look straight up, this would be what you would see in the sky. And we need to remember that the sky is not flat, so we need to make this kind of like a dome. And that this red line around here where there's blackness, this is actually the horizon. Okay? So we have the western horizon here, the southern horizon here, the northern horizon up here, and the eastern horizon here. So this would be what you would see in the sky. And we can see that we have Scorpio, we have Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Libra. It's almost directly overhead. Why? Because Bangalore is so close to the equator. And when you're born close to the equator, the Bhava cusps are going to be fairly spaced apart like you would expect. So if we looked at the actual chart of that Bangalore, this is what we would have. And these numbers are the Bhava cusps. So we'd see that they're in the appropriate houses. Again, because this is closer to the equator. Now, if we go to Stockholm instead, which is further north, same time, same year, again, this point right in the middle, that's directly overhead. That's if you just tilted your head and looked straight up. But what do we see? Now here are the star constellations of the Zodiac. They're further, closer to the horizon. Let's look at the difference here. So Bangalore, Zodiac almost directly across, right in the middle. Stockholm, further north on the globe, on the Earth, closer to the horizon. And because of that, that's what's going to make the Bhava cusps bunch up together. And so this is the birth chart for the same time, except in Stockholm. And what we can see is now these numbers represent the Bhava cusps. They're no longer where you would think they should be. We've got the first, the second, appropriate, but there's nothing in Aquarius. The third cusp gets kind of nudged over to Pisces. The fourth cusp gets nudged into Aries, which is the fifth house. The 10th and the 11th get nudged together into Libra. And so what that's going to tell us is that if we're reading this person's chart, and we try to read the person's chart about siblings from Aquarius, we're going to be wrong. And that's in relation to the siblings as an individual, as a concrete being that you can see. If we use the third Bhava cusp, then we would be more accurate in this regard, in regards to the concrete aspect, to the actual person that you can go and touch. Now, if we were wanting to know about their relationship to their sibling, sure, we could look at this third house, because that's in relation to the ascendant. The houses are in relation to the ascendant. Okay. Now, let's look at something else here. So here is Stockholm, and we see here's Jupiter, here's Venus and Saturn. We should be able to see these three planets because from the 1st through the 7th, this is the portion that's below your feet. So this is the part of the zodiac that you can't see based on a birth chart. The part that you can see that's already risen is from the 7th to the 1st again. And so planets specifically in the 8th house, in the 12th house, any of these houses you should be able to see in the sky, right? Well, let's take a look. So here's Stockholm. There's Jupiter. Now, how do I know that's Jupiter? Well, when I created the chart, I had a little more detail in the chart. So this is Jupiter. We can see Jupiter. But can we see Venus and Saturn? No. Venus and Saturn is not to be seen. Why? Because since we're in Stockholm further north, we cannot see all of the signs, because that ecliptic, that zodiac is lower in the sky, so some things get cut off in the end. But if we go to the Bangalore chart, well, look, there's Jupiter, and there's Venus and Saturn. Why can we see that? Because when you're closer to the equator, you can see what the chart actually is supposed to show. We can see that this area through here is visible, this area through here is not visible. But the further north you go, it becomes skewed, and so you might not be able to see Venus and Saturn, but you can still see Jupiter. And it all is based on the fact that the further north you go, the zodiac is lower in the sky. The closer you are to the equator, the zodiac looks like you might imagine it to be, which is almost directly overhead. So this is why the house cusp systems become different or become skewed. It's based on what we're actually seeing in relation to the north point, to the zenith, to the east point, and the ecliptic, and the equator. It seems complicated, and it actually is. At least in my mind it is. It took me a while to get my head around it. Now, you can spend some more time contemplating this. I think it's helpful because it gives you more of a spatial idea of what's going on astrologically. Or you can just use your software to calculate the cusps for you. And again, I'm using the Campanus system. And there are different house cusp systems. Some make more logical sense than others. People born close to the equator, you won't have to worry about it because it'll probably be lined up nearly perfectly. The further north you go, the more difficulty you're going to have with specific predictions if you don't use an accurate house cusp system, because as you see, these things bunch up together. Now, the other way that we can use these cusps can relate to how an area of life develops or produces itself. So for a Sagittarius Ascendant, if we were just reading the chart as though this were the 10th house, which it is, and we were going to talk about career and status, well, we should give it a Virgoan quality, a mercurial quality. And this would be true if we were using a chart of someone born close to the equator, because we'd have the 10th cusp in the 10th house. But what we see with this chart is the 10th cusp falls in Libra. So to be more accurate about their career and the quality of their career and how it's going to express and manifest itself, again, not the relationship to the career, but the career itself, it would have more of a Venusian Libra nature, because the 10th cusp falls in Libra. So if you have Kala, you can use the Campanus system. I'm not familiar with other astrology software programs, so I don't know how they work, but you should be able to experiment with these things. But this should give you a little more accurate detail in regards to reading a chart and understanding why things might not necessarily work out the way you expect, because it's probably due to the cusp placement. And this is also very important for Logitatia Vashtas, and it's important for timing and prediction. Because, for example, you might see Mars in Pisces here, and you might end up start talking about Martian influences on the mother during a Mars dasha, and that would be applicable in regards to maybe you're going to have some more frustration or anger to be resolved with the mother, because that's the relationship to the 4th house. But this Mars is actually going to be more profoundly impacting the siblings, the 3rd house relationships, because that Mars is closer and in the same sign as the 3rd cusp. So as far as the actual physical being of a person, the well-being of a person, you would use Mars in relation to siblings rather than Mars in relationship to the mother, because that would be the 4th house mother. Whereas Mars is impacting that 3rd Bhava cusp. So yes, it becomes a little confusing. Take your time with it, consider it. But it'll give you a little bit better insights and help you understand charts better. Same thing goes with Logitatia Vashtas. Whatever Logitatia Vashta is impacting a Bhava cusp, well, then you want to relate that influence to the particular cusp, not necessarily the house. It will have an impact on the house, but as far as the physical thing, you have to relate it to the cusp. And for Logitatia Vashtas, there's a few things that you can explore. My next book, Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2, which should be out in June, has a whole section dedicated to Logitatia Vashtas, how they're formed, what their influences are. Ernst Wilhelm has a great course on Logitatia Vashtas that you can download and listen to. So there's some options here. And to get a better sense of cusps and house systems, Ernst Wilhelm also has a video course on astrology videos. I think it's .net or .com, I don't recall correctly, on local space and Bhava systems. And this is just a summary with a little bit different graphics explaining what he took. He went into quite detail with, and also went into very elaborate explanations with the different kinds of house systems and why one might work versus another. So this is of a technical nature, I realize, but hopefully it has helped clear your understanding of cusps. And now when an astrologer talks to you about a particular cusp and you say, well, no, that's not my third house, you understand why the cusp might be different than the actual house and what the application might be. So thank you, Lada. It was enjoyable to create the video for you. Hope you're doing well, and we'll be in touch soon.